from the Denver Broncos Media Center, welcome to Broncos Country Tonight with Ryan Edwards and Benjamin Allbright.
Welcome to Broncos Country Tonight as we break down some pretty major news for the Denver Broncos. They have traded Von Miller to the LA Rams for a second and third round pick in the 2022 NFL Draft. Ben, I thought we'd be coming in here talking about the Broncos getting back to 500, the 17-10 win over Washington, but certainly takes a back seat to this news.
Well, and rightfully so. 8-time Pro Bowler, face of the franchise for the last decade. Von Miller now with the Los Angeles Rams. The Broncos get back 2 draft picks, a second, a third in the coming draft. It's kind of one of those things. Just like the ending of that game was kind of a mixed bag. Even though it was a win for the Broncos, it's kind of a mixed bag. I guess you have some sadness seeing a fixture like Von move on. But I think if you look at it objectively from the business side of the house, the Broncos got kind of a haul for Von. It was not what they were expected to get. That was not what they were projected to get. Paid a premium to eat his salary, which opened up the market to a team like the Rams when they otherwise wouldn't have been able to take him. And you get basically a quarterback haul for a defensive end that is going to be 33 next season. So I thought the Broncos got a pretty good deal out of it. I think Von lands with a contender. He at least has to be happy about that portion of it. And I think that everybody is as happy as they can be out of a situation that nobody's happy with.
Yeah, I was going to say, I know the fans have mixed emotions about this, and they're kind of frustrated because, again, there's a certain signaling to this. It's an end of an era here with the Broncos. Might even be signaling to the rest of the team, maybe even to the fan base, that they don't think that they have what it takes to really contend this year. We could get into that a little bit. But I think more than anything, if you take it on its face value, as you just sort of laid out there, face value, getting 2 picks is more than we had projected. If you listen to us on Broncos Country Tonight, and you can find the radio segments at broncoscountrytonight.com, we talked a lot about Von Miller last week. And we said that we just didn't expect any team to come with that kind of offer, mostly because the teams that would be available, first of all, salary cap would be a function, and secondly, it's a rental for half the year. And knowing that would be the case, we thought at best you were getting maybe 1 day 2 pick. And if that's the case, it's probably not worth it for the Broncos. In this case, they got 2.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is basically what the Chiefs got for Alec got. Paid for Alex Smith, when he in the Niners, when he was in his prime, they would paid for Alex Smith. This is quarterback territory. So, I think they made an offer they couldn't refuse, and the Broncos are like, well, he's not coming back at the end of this year. We probably can't re-sign him, so let's get what we can out of this. They would have been capped at a 5th rounder when the compensatory formula because of the vested veteran 10-year multi-contract stipulations in there. So for him and for a guy like, for instance, Kareem Jackson, who've been around the league longer than a decade, that kind of makes sense to make that move, whereas it may not for a Melvin Gordon or somebody like that.
Now, I think a lot of people wondered by the fact the Broncos won the game against Washington, maybe they wouldn't be quote-unquote sellers. Does this signify to you the beginning of any kind of sell? And again, whenever people actually watch this video, it might be past the trade deadline anyways. But this, for me, feels like more of a situation in a vacuum. It is because it was that offer for Von Miller. It isn't necessarily the beginning of something.
I don't think they're going to be sellers at all. I think, there's a narrative out there in sports talk about a rebuild, but I don't think internally that they believe that. I think internally they think that they got one player, they moved on for him. They just won the game without him.
Yeah.
They had multiple sacks in that game. It wasn't like they weren't getting pressure. And Washington's line is not that bad.
Yeah,
frankly.
5 sacks in that game.
So, I feel like that. I feel like that. The team is looking at this as the general manager is looking at this as, well, it's a long shot for us to win a Super Bowl. We might make the playoffs. I've got this asset here that I can get picks for the future that I need to go ahead and move, but we're not going to sell everything off as we are still competitive. We're a 500 football team. We have a shot at the West and a shot at a playoff spot.
And meanwhile, you got to think about next year because you do have some big decisions, including the quarterback, coming up as soon as the offseason begins. And that's something that's very real for this team, as we've been talking about quite a bit this year. Regardless of what happens this year, that is going to be one of the first decisions along with the coaching staff that's going to come up right away.
And I think those two may even be intertwined, especially if you're going after trading a quarterback, which the Broncos now have the assets to be in competition for some of these other teams that would be competing.
Certainly very important. So what do you think that the locker room takes away from this? And what have you heard about their reaction to it so far?
They were surprised. I know there was some reporting out there that they'd known for a week and all this. That's not accurate.
That's been amended, by the way, a little bit from Albert Breer. But
okay,
yeah.
I haven't seen the amendment, so I couldn't tell you. But I know the initial reporting out there was not correct. And Vaughn has denied some aspects of that. I'd say they were surprised, a little blindsided by it. There's a sadness to it. Vaughn was the last skill position player left from the Super Bowl run. Brandon McManus is the only other player on this team that's left from the Super Bowl. So there was a little bit of sadness to that. There's also some excitement. Some guys that felt like that they could have taken a bigger leadership role, but because of their place in the locker room and their relative youth compared to some people like that, felt often that maybe they should not be the person out front speaking those things. I wondered about that. And I feel like that they can take that role on now, especially with recent play on the field, having big games.
I wondered about that, and I'm glad you brought it up because I was listening to Teddy Bridgewater, who was on KOA earlier, and he was talking about, because that question was asked him about, okay, where's the leadership voice going to come from? He said, I think a lot of this is going to actually happen organically. I think a lot of these guys, as you kind of put it, have been looking forward to those opportunities to maybe step into a little bit of a role. And I'm interested to see specifically Bradley Chubb. I mean, when he gets back on the field, and he's going to get back on the field here in a few weeks, I'm interested to see what kind of role he takes, because he now is the guy that was drafted to be the heir apparent. And he's going to get to be here for another year after this. Kind of wonder what that's going to look like for him.
He's going to have to earn it with play on the field.
100%.
But there are other guys in that locker room right now that have just recently been paid that I think are now the big money guys and now the face of the franchise. And I think guys like Shelby Harris and Justin Simmons especially are going to be the faces and the voices of this franchise.
Yeah, it certainly seems to fit very well. So, quickly here, because the Broncos did play a game and they are in season here. At 4-4, what does it mean to you? I know that it wasn't the cleanest win, but certainly under the guise of it's tough to win in the NFL, you did get a win. You can only play the teams that are on your schedule, and they did beat this team. So for what it's worth, I know fans don't all feel great about the win, but right now as we sit here today, how do you think fans should feel about this team?
I think you are what your record says you are at this point. You're a 500 football team, and the teams that you beat are not exactly good teams. I think that the good news is you've played 8 games, you got 9 games left, and the rest of it doesn't matter. There are 9 games in front of you. You don't have to win all 9. You just have to win the next one. And if you have that attitude, that mentality, you approach the craft that way, and you match up that way, and you go out and execute, you might be able to do that. You might be able to make the playoffs.
That's really what it seems like this team has been like the entire time. It seems like their mentality, every time I've talked to a player for the pregame or otherwise, every single time I ask them about the season, about where things are at, most of them say it like that. Well, all we can do is really focus on the game in front of us. And it sounds very cliche, but in the end, for this team, that's actually a very good way to look at it, because as Teddy's mentioned multiple times, well, we can't really do much about the games we lost. Yeah. We can't really change that fact.
Right. You get to that's a pablum quote, but you get to a certain point in the season, like right now, you're midway through the season, you're at 500, it can break either way. So you have to have the confidence that you're able to, you just go in and win the next game and worry about that. And I know they talk about that in the pressers, but a lot of those guys don't mean a lot of the stuff they say in the pressers. It has to be that way now, though. You have to get to that point, because you can look back if you look backwards at what you've beaten, what you've lost to, you're just going to be dejected going into Dallas against a team that on paper looks a lot better.
Yeah, speaking of Dallas, we'll start to lean into that game when we come back next time. For Benjamin Allbright, I'm Ryan Edwards. Thanks for watching Broncos Country Tonight.